Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. Good morning, depending on where you are in the country or the world. My name is Mike Dugan. I am here in scenic Northport, New York, coming to you, and we're going to be talking about housing and places that we have found throughout different areas of the country and where people are staying. I would like to welcome some of our regulars. Clark is joining us, Clark Lampging from Clark County in Nevada, and Daryl Liggins from Oakland, which is a place that has a lot of this. We've got a couple more people who might be jumping on as we go through. Bill Guston and Bobby Holton can't be here with us today, so we'll just go and we're going to start talking about it. We know how fast and how quickly the hour goes. Also, we would like to say thank you to our friends at Keyhose for helping us put these on every month. We truly appreciate it. It's a great product. If you don't know, go try it. Go visit them. Go find somebody who's using the product and try it out. It's a great product and it works very well for us. So today we're going to be talking about some of the different things that happen with people in the housing crisis, and it can be from immigrants trying to live the American dream. It could be to people who have substance abuse and social issues with mental health, living in places off the street and things like that. And we've found quite a few of these in different places throughout. And we're going to look in a couple of minutes at a couple of pictures that Bill Guston sent us from down in Miami, where they have a large immigrant population and they're trying to work through some of these. But I'll talk a little bit about some of the ones I have seen in my career, and then we'll turn it over and we'll start talking to some of our guests. So the first one I think about all the time is when I was a young fireman. We went into a couple of different places up in Harlem where we had Chinese food restaurants. And in one of the Chinese food restaurants in the back of the store, the occupants of the store had their kids back there doing their homework. And then we realized that they were living above the walk-in box. And there was probably maybe 2 to 3 feet between the walk-in box and the ceiling. And they had the mattresses up there and they slept there. Now, these people are trying to live the American dream and working very hard in a business, paying rent, and they can't afford housing at that time. And this was in the 80s. They couldn't afford housing in New York City. I can't imagine what it is now. And they were living above the walk-in box. They bathed, they used the bathroom in the store, and that's how they survived. And now you get a run at this place at 3 o'clock in the morning for a store fire. You have to look at it. Another one I had was also in a Chinese food restaurant, and these people were in a corner in Spanish Harlem, and they had a vacant building above their restaurant. So the first floor was all commercial. And we went in there for a fire, and it was a very minor kitchen fire. But in the back of the store was a circular staircase that went up. And what they had done on the floor above was they had cut a hole and put the staircase in. And in this vacant building, they had created a space for themselves up in this vacant building, a living area that they ran pipes into. They ran extension cords for electricity, and they lived up there. From the street, the only way you could tell from the street, and we picked it up later, was there was an air conditioner in one of the plywooded over windows of the vacant building. And that was to keep it cool during the summer. And they ran an extension cord for this. But this is someone living in there. So you get into these places. And the other one I had as a lieutenant was in the South Bronx at a taxpayer commercial group of stores. And we had a rip-roaring job in here. And it's probably 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. And somebody says, I think that's her car. And they're pointing to a car in front of this bakery that's involved in fire because it's running the cockloft of this building. And the woman who owned the bakery, she used to have a ladder in the back, and she put almost like an attic, a pull down staircase. And she went up into the truss space. And if she was closing the store at 8 or 9 at night and opening back up at 5 o'clock in the morning for the bakery, she would go up there and sleep up there. And she had a TV, she had a couch, and she had all this little stuff up there that we found later. It was all destroyed and melted. But if she had been in there, she would have been dead. Okay. So these are the things that we start to see. And now there are things going on in other places. In Las Vegas, you have different people living in different things. A lot of these people who are working and trying to make a living in America cannot afford to live there. So what do? Okay. Well, it depends on where it is. I know I was out in Oakland a while back, and what Daryl's dealing with in Oakland. Go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah. Boy, you just said a lot of stories that reminded me of a lot of the things that I've experienced on the job, and everybody watching has experienced people living in strange places to some degree, and my experiences aren't always going to translate to what each person watching is experiencing. But one common thing I would have to say is usually these are going to be people struggling with money, or they're trying to not be noticed and because of their immigration status or whatever. They're trying to live rent-free or cheaper rent. Well, a lot of these we discovered just doing routine either medical calls or building inspections. And it's usually kind of a sad story. It's a impoverished family, cute little, children running around, hardworking adults there. And you could tell they're just trying to make it by because they're living in the back of a laundromat or somewhere in the back of a warehouse. And these have to be reported. There's not going to be any sympathy for the fire department if you're, kind of giving into this human struggle of somebody trying to get by if a tragedy strikes. And it shows that the fire department was there for an inspection or, some minor incident earlier, because it can quickly be shown that we were negligent in our duties. It has to be reported to fire prevention or get PD involved. Try and get them a place to stay through Red Cross or whatever measures your department has, but it has to be reported. We can't just skate by and tell the person, hey, you really can't stay here. It has to be formal. It needs to be documented. The most severe tragedy that we had in Oakland that put a lot of our members, on the witness stand was called the Ghost Ship Fire. And those of you that are familiar with the Ghost Ship Fire know that it was a very large tragedy. We lost 36 people that were in a warehouse. Now, it was a party and it could have been packed a lot more, but fortunately, the address on the flyer for the party was showing it as in Oakland, we have avenues, streets, and East Streets. So for instance, we could have 36th Avenue, East 36th, and 36th Street. So it was misadvertised, and a lot of people went to the wrong location, or there could have been dozens more people in there. Someone was living illegally in this warehouse prior, and the police were even subject to interrogation because they were there for a police matter. They're not even firefighters. They're there for a police matter. And the public outcry was that they should have reported these living conditions, poor electrical, poor sewage, and things like that. And there may have been some opportunity for reporting that earlier, but it ended up being a really large tragedy, to say the least. And it hit close to home because it's basically across the street from the firehouse I spent most of my time with. Every day I go out on runs, you're you're looking at the building to this day. And so that was one thing. As far as people illegally living in places, I think the one thing I'd want people to really focus on is that you can't treat any locked, especially commercial building, as clear. I have seen people living in the back of many different types of businesses, clothing stores, retail stores, down in the basement of something, and you may be there just on an EMS call, and then you see a bed or something like that. But even though the place is locked up with a gate and a chain or whatever, there could still be people in there because there's people struggling to find a place to stay, and that's something I'd want everybody to really think about. In addition to this, and you obviously know in your own district, my district was mostly Victorian era houses when it was built, and those were just all very large single family dwellings. And now predominantly they're almost all, duplexes, triplexes or something, and they're changing rapidly. They're excavating out, and so you may have what was a 4-story house, and now there's 4 different families living in there, to the point where some of those, they're putting locked security gates inside of each of the residents and then subleasing those out. And so not everybody's going to be forthcoming of how many people are staying there, because there's money to be made, and people want to have a place to stay. But just be sure to search all areas, attics, basements, and detached garages. They're all places that people can live in. I'll have some more to add, but I'm curious if Clark or Mike, if you have anything to add there.
Go ahead, Clark.
Yeah, on that ghost ship fire, I obviously wasn't there, but Daryl and I have talked at length about that. And I actually teach. Daryl gave me some information. He gave me a lot of pictures he took on scene, and I actually use that in our officer academy. And the moral of the story is, what's in these big commercial buildings, right? What if there's no sign on the door? What is it? Is it a paper mill? Is it a shop? Are they making cabinets in there? Are they storing hazardous materials? Or in Daryl's case, is it a residence with a full-on nightclub on a second story that they built themselves? And if you are a student of the fire service, you should really research the ghost ship fire. I make it a point to make sure everyone in my agency knows how important that fire was, just because of the sheer fact that you drive by this building every day. And fortunately, Daryl said he knew something was going on, but how many buildings in our area we drive by, we have no idea there's people actually living there. And a big warehouse like that with that many people in it, it's tragic. It's tragic, but it happens. It happens a lot. And I'd like to touch on Mike's, Captain Dugan's comment when he said that he had the vacant building, the people living in the vacant building with the air conditioning unit. That is a very good indicator of someone living in a space that's not supposed to be lived in. So in Las Vegas, we don't have any people living in attics, because your attic in Las Vegas in the summertime will be over 125 degrees. So that's really not an option for us. But we do have garage conversions, and a lot of garage conversions. Our typical track home garage is going to be 20 feet deep by about 12 feet wide. I've seen 2-3 apartments subdivided inside of a garage. And you walk in, one of your first and only indications is an AC unit in the side of a garage. All right, that should be, but if you're not looking for it, you're not going to notice it. And typically people say, oh, you can see extra cars and the street's going to be busy. Well, in my experience, if people are living in a garage or in an attic, they're not going to own vehicles. So that's probably not a very good indication that there's people living there. And most of the time I've seen illegal wiring. So they jump right from, your electrical panel is going to be in the garage, and they tap right in the electrical panel and they run their AC units. I've seen them running washers and dryers and lights and things like that, just straight uninsulated wires running through the garage with people living in there. So yeah, we do see a lot of that in Las Vegas. And I'm sure every single agency can tell you of a sushi restaurant or a Chinese food restaurant that you go in the back, and in the back storeroom, there's a mattress and a pillow in the storeroom between the shelves. I've seen that quite a few times. And we talk about like a rescue profile for strip malls. And, for a strip mall, what's your rescue profile? Even if it's up and running, it's typically not a very high rescue profile, because the size of the store compared to the glass front and the glass doors, right? If you're sitting in a Subway and the place catches on fire, well, you're going to stand up and you're going to walk out of the Subway, right? And typically your nail shop, your Subway, your card shop, your massage parlor, all that. Well, now in the evening, you could have people, even though it's all closed up, like Daryl was saying, you could have people living in the backs of these businesses. No cars out front, no indication whatsoever that there's the closed sushi restaurant has the cooks and the waitresses living in the back of the sushi restaurant. So really difficult because there's very few indications that there's actually people occupying these spaces.
It's really amazing the creativity of where people will live. And I don't think it's any secret that we have a tremendous homeless problem in the city of Oakland. It really seemed to explode about 5 years ago. Mike Dugan was saying that he was in Oakland and saw a lot of RVs. We have tons of people living in, I don't know where they get the RVs, but they're living in RVs and tents and under freeways. And we have fires daily in RVs and homeless encampments. It's a bulk of our fire duty right now. Some of the things that I have seen for people getting creative, I remember being at what looked like it was a pile of trash on fire. And those refrigeration trucks where people drive a pickup truck and in the back, they'll have like a little refrigeration unit. They try to sell meat or something like that out of the back. So one of those units was sitting on the pile of trash. And as we're overhauling it, we open it up and there's a bed in there. And it's like, oh man, thank God someone wasn't in there. But on a secondary search, I don't know if I had would have thought to be searching a space like that. But now it's top of mind that you have to search every space. And we're going to share some different war stories and things like that. And people listening obviously have their own stories, so please share in the comments or whatever. I went to an RV fire. We go, it's a large RV, the whole back end is burning. We're flowing, an inch and 3/4 line in there. We're flooding the thing. It's full of bicycles and there were some propane tanks in there. There was all kinds it was a hoarder condition in the RV. So 3/4 of this thing is completely burned up in a parking lot. And it got towed away. A couple months later, I go to an EMS call where somebody in a car happens to be behind where this RV had been towed. So we're treating the person for a medical issue. And I look and I'm like, oh, this is the RV. I guess this is where it was towed. And I see the gentleman that was at the RV during the fire. And I did a double take and said, hey, are you living in this? Because the thing seems completely burned up. And he says, yeah, I know the back is burned up, but the front's still okay. And he was just living in the space of the driver's seat. And it was just like, it's hard to see this. This is a human being. I saw the halo marks on his forehead. And I asked him about his story. And, he had been doing very well in the tech world and was in a vehicle accident where he was hit by a train. He said, you guys actually rescued me. My car was hit by a train. And he was in a halo and he was out of the workforce for so long. He got hooked on pain medications and stuff. So there's human tragedy behind all of these incidents. And so, it's just, it's tough to see some of that stuff and sometimes a lot of children, but one thing we did is anything homeless related specifically, we have a code. We say we have to say a code when we close a call, and we made a category for people displaced or the fire was due to homeless activity, just so fire prevention can keep track of those types of things. And then just going back a little bit about getting your fire prevention or PD involved. do it right away while you're at the scene. You may have difficulty accessing that area if you're not there for any legitimate business. I don't know if this is going to require some type of search warrants or something, but you don't want it to get to that point. You're just going to, we'll call our fire prevention and they'll get people out there right away. Arson can take photos if needed, or take photos from us. We're allowed to do that. But you want to really get on this as soon as possible. And this had nothing to do with people illegally living in a space, but we had a very tragic fire a couple weeks after the ghost ship, an apartment building that killed 4 people. So I'm giving the plot away right away. But we had an apartment building where there was some illegal wiring and all these things going on, rats running around all over the place. And this was on a Friday that they were given basically firm orders that they weren't going to displace everybody, but they were going to give them till Monday to rectify some of these issues. And the fire happened on Saturday. 3 floors totally involved. We're really fortunate we didn't lose firefighters in this. Some people were crawling down hallways trying to rescue people with, they said it was like a Hollywood movie, fire coming out everywhere, floors collapsing. So yeah, you got to jump on it right away. And the sympathy for, people's condition, we'll have to handle that through Red Cross or some other means. But, time is not always on our side.
And I got a couple of things, just points I want to bring out on both of what you guys have been saying, on what Clark was talking about the illegal garages. We've seen a lot of them with hot plate. And these people a lot of times have issues and they fall asleep with the hot plates or whatever else. And the other one that I always tell people is window ACs. Okay, if it's a building that you feel should be centrally air conditioned, window ACs indicate something. I also went to a job where one of my guys was almost killed by an AC unit. It fell down from the 3rd floor and hit another AC unit on the 2nd floor and bounced away from him, but it would have hit him on the head and killed him probably. Now, we looked, and when we looked at this building, there was a window AC in every window, and some of them had 2 window ACs on top of each other. And we figured something is going on. It's either illegal drugs, that they're doing something, they're making heat. It could be hydroponics at the time. This was before marijuana was legal in a lot of places. What it turned out to be in this one was a place that they were manufacturing those DVDs that you used to buy in Times Square. And, again, a lot of times people went down there and these people were selling DVDs of brand new movies for $5. And one of my friends bought one for his grandkids. It was Cinderella. It was supposed to be Cinderella. He didn't realize Cinderella in this one was spelled S-I-N. Okay. And it was an adult entertainment movie, let's say, that he put on for his grandkids. And he says, I'm trying to figure out which buttons and cover their eyes and everything else. He said it was a disaster. But that was going on in there. If you see a window AC in a building that you think should have central air, that should be a red flag. That should throw something up to you. And it's just some of these things indicate to us that there's a lot of problems going on here, and we have to be aware of it. Now, I know a lot of guys who are crazy about their cars and car nuts and all that, and they will air condition their garages and all that other stuff. But think about the neighborhood, what kind of cars these people probably own, depending on where they are in the social economic scale of everything else and what's going on there. The other one that Daryl was talking about that was young in my career, we were dispatched. The engine went out to a rubbish fire and they called the truck, and usually it was just an engine only. And we got there and we're like, what the hell are you getting us out for a rubbish fire? Well, it was an occupied rubbish fire. It was a homeless guy living in a cardboard box, and some kids set his cardboard shanty, whatever else, on fire. And they killed him. He died. But at the point, they were trying to get him out, and they needed help with the community and everything else. So we went there. So these things like that RV that's burnt out, like any of those things, the refrigerator boxes, cardboard shanties. You might not think anybody is desperate enough to live in there, but there are probably people who live in these spaces. And it's something that we have to think about. Okay. We have to think about this. Okay. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And I just want to say one more time to our friends at Key Hose, we thank you for helping us put this on. Key Combat Ready, great hose. All of my guys who are engine guys who use Key Hose, love it. If you got any questions, contact Key Hose and take a look at their stuff. It will stand up to the tests. Thank you again, Key Hose. So go ahead, Clark. I threw some stuff out at you on it.
Yep. I want to know if you guys or anyone out there that watching us has any experience with people living in storage units. This is something that we've come across many times. These, you rent a storage space, and we've found multiple times that you go into these places and people are actually using them as apartments. They're not allowed to, obviously, so they wait till everyone's gone. They have access, so they swipe in at 10 o'clock at night when the office is closed, and they go in there and they sleep, and then come back out at 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, jump back up. And some of these people have jobs. They have jobs. They go to they have a health club membership, like a $12 a month health club membership. They go to the health club and they shower and they get cleaned up, and they actually work, and they are living in a storage unit. And these storage units that we have, they're not contained, right? It's open on the top. So you might find electrical cord running from one of the power boxes up and over and dropping in. That's a problem. And also, if anything catches fire, and what people store in there, right? We've had some horrific fires in storage units. I've never been in a storage unit that wasn't cram-packed to capacity and had a lot of illegal stuff in it. Paints and construction guys use these units to store some of their construction materials in. So it's a pretty catastrophic fire when we do have them, and to have someone in there living is a problem. So one of the things you want to look at if you're there after hours, anyone that's in the lock position, in the closed position, does not have a lock on the outside. That's indicative that someone could be sleeping there, because typically they leave them open. They leave them open to keep people from doing that. So you can walk down the hall and find empty. Well, if there's one closed without a lock on it, that's something you might want to knock on that door and open that up if you're there responding to a call or something.
Well, that's a good point. I've only seen that once, and I remember going to assist PD on the scene type call for a woman with a psychiatric problem, and she was living in a storage facility. Nearby there was at our subway, the Fruitville station, we got a medical call. We're looking around for the person, and they were living in there's these plastic boxes where you can stuff your bicycle in there and lock it up. And a man living inside where you're supposed to store your bicycle. And I think, back to what we said earlier, this really just shows that we have to do secondary searches, on any type of fire. Anywhere a person may be able to find a space to sleep, they may be sleeping. And we've all heard stories of people missing humans in a secondary search in a house, or expecting to find victims. And if we could miss them in a house or an apartment, we could certainly miss them in a trash fire or something else. So, and I think the other thing with secondary searches is sometimes we're in a bit of a rush. We say primary search, and then secondary search is pretty quick. It doesn't have to be fast. Take the time. Make sure you check everything. That you do a thorough secondary search. I know those of us that have kind of geeked out Detroit fire radio traffic and things, you can often hear them say that a secondary is not complete due to the condition of the building. So they're not putting themselves out there saying it was complete if they're unable to complete that. And that's something we don't want to just say lightly that it was complete and it's not. You know, if we need an excavator or something else, or search dogs from USAR or something else to make sure that we really have a thorough secondary, then that's what we'll have to do. But let's not do it just to check a box, you know, quickly. Let's make sure we check everything very thoroughly.
I tell my guys on a secondary search like you're looking for a cat, a small animal. Dig through every pile of laundry, go through those closets on your hands and knees, pull everything out of the bottom of the closet like you're looking for a cat.
And very honestly, twice in my career, we missed a victim. And one was at a vacant building fire. First, they were both at vacant building fires, but the first one was at a vacant building fire. And it was a woman who had a substance abuse problem. And she and somebody were in a building that had a little mezzanine, but we didn't even know it was there. And it was only 14 inches high. And they went up in there, they slid in there to get high. And he decided he wanted to do all the drugs, and he slit her throat. And I am a brand new fireman, and I'm down there with the hook, and I'm hitting underneath this mezzanine. And I'm like, nope, that's solid, that's solid, that's solid. And okay, we pulled all the ceiling. We didn't see anything. There was no indication of blood, nothing. And it was, 2:00 in the morning. We couldn't see much. We had flashlights, but they weren't as good as they are today. And we said, okay, we're done. And we looked, and we thought we did a thorough secondary search. The next morning in the daylight, the cops come, they put a ladder up there, and they find this woman's body. And of course, firemen being firemen, they rode me like a rented mule, that she died of hook wounds, that I punctured her, and they rode me. But you gotta take the time and stay there. It taught me. The second time I missed a guy was he was a substance abuser. He had a needle in his arm, and he was in the building in a closet, and he'd probably been dead for 6 months. He was mummified. So that one, they said it was very easy to miss because we were in this vacant building. He was covered with stuff, and I mean, it was horrible. But never again will I ever be. And as a boss, I always said, never will I ever do this. We are going to stay here if we have to stay here for a week. And we had one with a missing woman in a hoarding condition. And we were probably there for 22 hours looking for her. And the funny part about that story is one of my guys thought they found her because they heard crying. Well, it turned out to be a doll. And every time he moved, because we went into her apartment and there was only 18, 20 inches between the ceiling and the stored trash. And every time he's crawling, he hears this, and we dig this stuff out, and we are digging, and finally we come up with this doll. And I'm like, you son of a gun. And we found the woman after 20-something hours, and it wasn't pretty. So you got to spend the time. The secondary is not complete until you have accounted for anybody. If somebody says there's somebody in there, you believe them if you have to get a wheelbarrow and clean this place out, okay, get a shovel and a wheelbarrow and clean it out down to the floorboards, you do that. Because if you leave, you will be on the front page of the local paper when they find that body the next day. And I have seen the pictures. I have seen, the person who was hidden under a mattress by somebody who killed them in a jealous rage, whatever else, with drugs involved, a bad drug, whatever else. I have seen the pictures and I've seen the papers. Okay. You do not want it to be your crew, your company, your department. Go down to the floorboards. I've been in places where they have wheelbarrows on the rigs to clean it out. We'll get it down. We're going to make sure we get down to the floorboards. Okay, that's your department policy, so be it. But you better not be the guy or girl who misses one, because it's going to come back to bite you.
What I'll also add on, since we're talking about secondary searches, if somebody's coming in to, hey, we're told to search this room, or we're doing a secondary, don't be the one to say, we've already searched it. Let them search it again. One of the people I know we missed on the fire I was on, because it was a small fire, it was a back wall of a refrigerator, and so everybody was kind of, it's not a raging fire, and that energy level goes down a little bit, but the secondary had been complete, so to think, and a male was found later, but people that went up there, it's like, hey, we've already checked this space, we've already searched. You can't over search. Just let them check it again. There's no harm in it. There's, the things, fire's already out. Things are winding down. And so, if they're going to search it 2, 3, 4 times, there's no harm in that. And it could possibly save somebody.
Check the tub too. Check the tub. People, human behavior, for some reason, they will retreat to the tub and they will lay in the tub thinking that's going to help them. Well, typically what happens, we're putting water in the attic space, the bathroom ceiling collapses, fills up the tub with debris and water, and you could have someone under the debris in the water. So I tell you guys, put your arm, as much as it sucks, put your arm completely into the tub and sweep through that tub that's full of water and debris. So I've got,
one person that, I can say we definitely saved from a fire. Me and my classmate Bobby Gonzalez, we searched an apartment, and the guy had stabbed his girlfriend, barricaded himself in there, and lit the place on fire. So it was quite a scene with the cops and everything. We found this guy in the tub. He had a lab on top of him. The lab died. He was not breathing, and we managed to be able to drag him out of this apartment, intubate him, and he survived. But yeah, it was that exact scene of water filling the tub. I think he thought he would shield himself from the fire, and he made it. But yeah, you're right. And getting someone out of a bathtub with that toilet in the way is quite a feat. Of somebody wet and naked, and
why are they always naked, Daryl?
That's a drill to try.
Why are they always naked? So I've got Jimmy Davis. Jimmy Davis is supposed to join us from Chicago Fire. He's a training, he's a captain at Chicago Fire, Engine 42. He couldn't figure out Zoom today, but in Chicago, he wanted me to mention that they got an influx of homeless encampments, and what they're finding in Chicago is they're using propane to cook with and to heat. And typically, and I've seen this a lot on my job too, they set their own stuff on fire on a regular basis. So, and you got a trash fire, like we're in a rubbish fire, you might have 5-gallon propane bottles inside that rubbish fire. And we all know how catastrophic that can be if you come across one of those unexpected. And Jimmy Davis also says that they got a bunch of illegal conversions in attics. I guess in Chicago, you can live in an attic. You can't live in an attic in Vegas like we talked about. But he says they're actually, people are leasing their attics out to other families and letting them live there. And then again, well, how do you access an attic? As far as I'm concerned, the only way is that the drop down, and you might have a ladder in there and stuff like that. So if there's ever a situation, you have extremely limited egress if you're living in an attic.
A lot of times what they're doing is putting a staircase in the back of the house up to the attic space, almost like a deck, and they have a separate entrance, and they close off that one in the front. So now these people are up in the attic and they only have one way in and one way out. So again, when we're doing our 360 and our size up and everything else, if it looks like a duck and it quacks, it's a duck. If it looks like it could be occupied space, it's occupied space. I always say where I live, we have a lot of basements. If I see an air conditioner in a basement window, that means they have converted that basement into living space. So look around at some of these things and look at some of the things that we see. I think what we're going to do now, if you guys don't mind, is we're going to have Peter put up a couple of shots that Bill Gustin gave us from Miami, and we're going to talk about these things.
Yeah, and while Peter's bringing those pictures up, I'll just share a story about what you just talked about. We had a fire in a residence, and we were inside looking for the staircase to the attic. And a member that went to the back of the house made a transmission of, be advised, access to the upper floor is via a exterior staircase in the rear of the building. And we were able to get a line to the back and up there. So if you see anything like that, a staircase or some access, don't keep that information to yourself. Definitely share that.
Yep. So we're looking at Bill's picture, okay? And what do you see here? It's an indescript commercial type structure, correct?
No
Okay.
label at all. I have no idea what's going on inside that building right now.
No idea at all. And that's when, very honestly, when I'm out on building inspection, I'm going to go knock on the door. If one of those signs on that building, one of those signs there has a phone number, I'm calling that phone number. I'm putting them on notice. Okay? Because again, I will tell the story, but this is Bill's. Go start that back again. Okay? This is in that warehouse. Okay? Now, that looks like it was made by a kindergartner. Okay? And are you going to trust your people going up that stairs with a charged hose line, okay, and to get people out? What happens on the way back down if we have to bail out of that very quickly? That staircase is definitely not the code, not anything. But we have, go to the next one, please, Peter. Okay, we come up there and look at what we have. We have a bedroom. We have a bedroom, okay? There's somebody living up there. They've put a bedroom up there and they are going to be staying up there, okay? Probably the toilet facilities are downstairs, okay? They're not doing any plumbing, and this is an old cockloft space. Now, what you might see in a lot of these is, depending on the construction type, this might be a truss roof where they've taken out some of the members of the truss, the supporting, the cords coming back, and not the top cord and the bottom cord, but the supporting members going through the trusses, okay, the webs of the trusses, and they've taken them out to allow them to put these holes in there. Go to the next one, please, Peter. Okay, now this is just somebody living up there, okay, and what's up there? Who's up there? Okay, what kind of construction is this? Now, you can see, if you look at the picture, and I don't know if you can see, but right above the opening, they did put a smoke detector in. Okay.
That's code now. That's cool, Mike. Once you got a smoke detector, you're up to code, right? You're good.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I guarantee you the battery hasn't been taken out to go into the remote control. Okay. But now, and look at the other thing, the doorway. It's a blanket that's folded up down over that doorway. Okay. And if you look, and this picture, it was pointed out to me, what's sitting at the top of the stairs?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I said. You know, we see these, you know, these kids, and it really kind of pulls at the heartstrings of the family. And if I report this, they're going to be homeless, and these things, you got to do it. That's the best thing for them, is to be in a safe space, you know.
Absolutely.
Funny, I see the blankets covering the doorway. It reminds me of a lot of firehouses.
And is there one more, Peter? No, that's the last one. Okay.
That's it, Mike. Yeah.
Okay. But again, scary as heck. But think about this child. And if you don't do something and something happens to her, who's that on? Who's that on? We have to do something about these things. We have to take the time to look at these things. There have been, and you can Google this, there have been buildings in New York City where they've taken an 8-foot apartment and cut it in half. And then you go up and you crawl into yours. You've got 4 feet. And they cut the thing in half and put people on both levels in apartment buildings in New York City. There is a huge problem all over the area of illegal bedrooms. If you are a student of the fire service, go back and look at the Black Sunday report, okay, where the illegal partition blocked them from getting to the fire escape. okay? And that illegal partition was to make another bedroom so they could charge more because they were renting these rooms out to different individuals, and each individual was paying for a room. Locked bedroom doors, SROs, as we call them in New York City, single room occupancies, okay? They can be legal. They can be legal. Each room needs to have two means of egress, two different ways to get out of the things. But a lot of these people are not doing this. They're breaking up. They're taking larger apartments from larger families because our family dynamic has changed in the last 50 years. I mean, there aren't very many families with more than one or two kids. Okay. When I grew up, I mean, I was one of six, and most of my neighbors had more than six. Okay. But now, so that apartment, that 4-bedroom apartment, they don't need it. They can make 2 apartments out of that. Okay. And they do this in private dwellings. They do this in apartments. Okay. Because it's all about the money. It's all about what we are making for this money. So we have to look at these things. And that's where you go out on the building instruction and the building inspection instruction, the building inspection. And when you get out there and you look at these places, you know, I used to tell my guys, okay, building inspection is a walk in the neighborhood ruined by paperwork. I'll do the paperwork. Okay, so let's go out and walk in the neighborhood and take a look about what's going on. We were in one day, and I mean, I'm doing the paperwork. It was a supermarket. And up the stairs in the supermarket was the second floor where they had a storage room. And it was all just storage of groceries and everything else. Well, you went around back, made a U-turn, and went back down a hallway. They put in 4 apartments. It was a dead-end hallway, unsprinkled, no windows, no secondary means of egress. And they put in 4 apartments. And I mean, they were nice little 1-bedroom apartments, 4 of them, to make money for this supermarket. And again, I understand the guy's trying to cover his expenses and make money. There were 4 rooms on a dead-end hallway. It was a death trap. Okay, we had to vacate it, get the landlord involved, get the fire prevention involved, get the chief down to inspect it. You had to get the citywide tour commander to approve the vacate. No, can't leave these people in there. You can't leave. If it's dangerous to their safety, you cannot leave these people in that space where they could die in the event of a fire, because that will come back on you. Okay. And one other story that I have, just because we were talking about these vacant buildings that we don't know anything about. My guys went into a vacant building one day, and it was a water leak in a vacant factory. And the people in the neighborhood had been going through the building and stealing what they could. And they took the water meter, because the old water meters were brass and they were huge. Took the water meter, cut the pipe with the sawzall, took the brass, because it was going to be worth probably $100, $150. And the water was leaking out. It was like February, and there was water all over the street. Go in there, and there are signs on the wall. And there's one thing that says, you know, cyanide. There's another one that says base. Okay. And there's another one that says acid. I'm like, okay, time out. Let's go back out. We got to call somebody. So we called the chief. We called the hazmat response group. Well, it turned out it had been a metal finishing plant where they dipped and polished metal and etched metal and everything else. There was cyanide in there. There was an acid dip tank to clean the metal. And what the chemical engineer that showed up told us is, if we had had a fire in there and didn't know this and opened up the line, when the water hit that metal, that acid, and it was like the size of a 10 to 15 yard dumpster dip tank, when the water hit that acid, it would have probably caused an explosion that would have brought the ceiling down on our heads, the whole roof down on our heads, not even the ceiling, the roof down on our heads. If you don't know what's in that building, find out. And if the building scares you, and I go back to a guy who I loved from Worcester, Massachusetts, in the cold storage warehouse fire. Okay. And if you don't know that one, go study that one. Okay, and Chief McNamee said that building always scared me. Okay, if a building scares you, you should be drilling at it once a week with your people to get better at it. Make sure all of your crews are drilling on it once a week to get better at that building that scares you. Because you don't want to wait until it's on fire to find out why it scares you.
You know, I'll add something about knowing what's in your building. And earlier we were talking about our ghost ship fire. And one lesson that the city of Oakland learned from that is at the time our building inspections, and we do building inspections at the company level, was done by, is generated by business license. And so the companies will inspect businesses and apartment buildings that are, you know, less than 6 units. And so since it wasn't a business, it was just, you know, I don't want to say overlooked, but it had previously been a vacant building and there was no business license ever generated from it. So since now buildings are inspected by address, and so you'll at least get eyes on a building whether there's a legitimate business for it or not, and it'll give us greater coverage. So if you are inspecting just by business address, you know, think about how are you going to incorporate businesses that have no address. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on a little bit more is a lot of these people are getting very creative at living in areas outside of buildings, and we touched on some of the homelessness. When you're out on a medical call and somebody is you know, living in some place outside of a building in a creative space, that needs to be reported as well. We've had a lot of, you know, plywood structures and stuff under freeway overpasses, but back in February, our San Francisco Fire Department across the bay from us had a pretty involved rescue when they had a fire and discovered a homeless encampment that was enclosed inside of a concrete freeway overpass. And to remove this victim, they had to cut into the concrete, the underside of the freeway, to get in there to remove the victim. And it was a very involved rescue that they did an excellent job on. But I don't think people would have thought of people actually living inside of the freeway enclosure to the point where you have to access it with concrete saws and a USAR team. But if you go on a medical call and somebody's living in some creative space, that needs to be reported as well.
Yeah, I remember back when I was a fireman up in Spanish Harlem, part of the 2nd Avenue subway had been built in the 70s. And it was the underground portion, but there were no trains, there was no stations, there were tunnels. Well, we used to joke that we'd go down there, it would be Chud, cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. Okay, that these were people who were living down there underground because that's where they could live. They could find a space to live. And we have found people living in spaces under elevated bridge walkways, over highways and stuff. And there's a little thing underneath for the electricians to get in and wire up the lights or whatever else. And there's an electrical box. They break into that and then they live in there. And I mean, it's unbelievable. And you know, you see this, and I think Peter's going to try to bring up some pictures. Did you see the ones? And I forget where it was. I looked at the pictures briefly before we came on. Pete's sharing the screen now. But this was your department. That's what I thought. It was Oakland. And if you look at the pictures, okay, he's going to click on them. The next one, please, Peter. Okay, they had to access this almost like a manhole, a door above the freeway. This was a crawl space in the under the freeway.
This must have just happened.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very similar to what San Francisco dealt with. Actually,
Yep.
That looked like a photo of my former engine.
It said it's engine
13 or
18.
Yeah, there you go.
You
So
know?
this looks very similar to what I was describing San Francisco just dealt with.
Yep.
Maybe.
And this was,
I didn't even, I
just,
wasn't even aware of this incident.
yeah, this just happened. But, you know, you can expect people anywhere when you do these things. And that's the reality of the real world. Thank you, Peter. That's the
Mike,
reality. Yeah,
So on your topic of the what we call SROs,
yes,
typically, so one problem you'd have as a firefighter going down there, they typically secure their individual room with a padlock on the door, don't they?
yes, they do.
So again, advanced forcible entry. There, all of a sudden, I'm in a house, and all of a sudden, I have padlocks on bedroom doors. And if you go down, there's padlock, and then there's one that doesn't have a padlock on it. Well, that occupant takes the padlock off the front of the door, enters his apartment, closes it, and then puts the padlock on the back of the door. So again, if you're in one of these places and you find a room that's not padlocked and you can't get in, there's a good chance that there's someone actually in that space right now, padlocked inside.
And I have heard
Funny, I remember.
Go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, I was just thinking when I was a brand new firefighter, and I got to force one of my first doors. We had a vehicle fire, and it caught the apartment on fire next to it, and we have to force entry. And I forced the door, and you're proud of that, and it was fun. And we go crawling in, and once I forced the door, I left the irons outside. And then you need them inside. And so if there's a new firefighter listening, remember, you may need those things inside too. So don't just think of gaining entry. You may need entry into other rooms as you progress through this thing.
And we had an SRO in a neighborhood I worked in that was, I'm going to put this correctly, women who were trying to get out of the sex works trade, illegal sex works trades. They were performing sex acts for money. And what happened is the SRO, just as Clark was talking about, well, there was a lock on one of the doors, and we got a call for a lock in, and we're trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Well, she's inside her room, and somebody didn't like what she was doing, and they put a lock on the outside of her door and locked her in there. And she was in there for like 16 hours. So you never know. You never know.
I have one more war story. We found a homeless guy, and strangely enough, he wasn't a drug addict. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he was had some bad luck, a run of bad luck. And this individual was living on the roof of a laundromat. And the reason he was doing that is because he said that there's some guys, there was a turf war, it was a territorial war with some of these homeless guys, and there was a guy going around murdering homeless people. So this guy was fearing for his safety. So he managed to take a dumpster. He rolled a dumpster up to the side of the laundromat where the roof access ladder was, and he climbed up there. And it was the winter, and we get cold winters, believe it or not. We get cold winters in Las Vegas, and he would sleep next to the vent from the dryers. And these laundromats in Las Vegas, everything's open 24 hours. So at 3:00 in the morning, there's still people doing their laundry in Las Vegas. So he would be sleeping up there against this warm dryer pipe. And an owner from a next door building watched him one night go up there and then called the police and said, "This is what I saw." We went up there, brought the guy down, talked to him, and he says, I've been living up here for months, living on the roof of a laundromat outside.
It's insane. Yep. So go ahead, Daryl.
Yeah, I was just going to say, during the times where we were seeing a lot of rioting and things like that, and I'm sure those times are not over. And when we encounter them again, expect that you may have people sleeping in businesses just to protect their businesses. So we have a lot of people, they want to protect their bicycle shop or whatever it is, and they think trouble may be coming. And that is another time you may have people just, putting a sleeping bag on the floor to protect their business or something.
Yep. All right, Clark, closing statements. We're at a little over, we're at 2:01, so we're getting close.
Not really. I mean, I think we hit it all. Make sure you search, keep your eyes open, evaluate your rescue profile. even on medical calls. Walk up on medical calls and test your own knowledge. Try to figure out who's living in this building, take cues from the building, what's going on inside this building, what are the age of the people, how many vehicles, toys, wheelchair ramps, anything like that, AC units where they're not supposed to be. Just practice on EMS calls. Practice on EMS calls.
Go ahead, Daryl.
Work with your fire prevention and PD. Don't hesitate to notify them. And when you get a fire, expect victims, no matter where that fire is. Thank you.
Look for them always. And I will just add on to Clark. When you go on a medical call, you get invited into the place because they need help. Ask, what's going on here? What's happening? You know, can I just take a look down that doorway, see what's going on back there? What do you have back here? And a lot of times they're like, sure, you can look. Don't worry about it. Okay, go do that. If something looks weird in your neighborhood, look at it. Check it out. Go back there. Okay, don't ever assume that it's going to be safe or it's going to be what you think it is. Okay, verify it. Verify it. And if it's something bad, make sure that everybody who is in your company or who will respond to that fire knows about it, and it's entered into some kind of dispatch system or whatever else that, you know, the address of 234 Center Street has this. It has SROs. It has this. It's a homeless area. They live in the parking garage. Whatever it is, enter it in, protect yourself, protect your brothers and sister firefighters. And very honestly, for some of us, it might not be you that it's protecting, but it might be your legacy, your son or your daughter who's riding the truck in 15 to 20 years when you're no longer riding the truck, and you protected them by adding this information into it. Take your time to make sure you protect yourselves. I want to thank Keyhose for being our friend and helping us get through this. And I want to thank everybody out there. Thank you. God bless and be well.